So we got another session around community here. The topic for this session is how can community building create a shared sense of ownership to guide the psychedelic movement? And so our two presenters today, one is Mareesa Stertz. Mareesa Stertz is probably best known for her work in documentary filmmaking. She's the filmmaker, producer, host, everything, I think, of the Healing Powers series, and which was, I guess it's on Gaia TV now, formerly on Snoop Dogg's channel. And she's also one of the founders and contributors to the new Lucid News journalism platform, and also one of the programmers for the Aware Project, which is very relevant to this conversation as a community builder. And she also is the founder and organizer of the Psychedelic Leadership Summit. And then we have Troy Dayton, and Troy's been active in a whole bunch of things as well. He's a co-founder of Students for Sensible Drug Policy, which is a whole army of young community activists. And he's also one of the co-founders of the ArcView group. So folks may have heard a little bit about ArcView in one of the earlier sessions. And he's also former director of development at MAPS. So Mareesa and Troy are going to bring all their various experience in community here to share with you. Take it away, Mareesa and Troy.
Thanks, Mike.
Hey, thank you, Mike. All right, so I'll just dive right in. One, this is such a fantastic thing we're doing here. I'm so excited we're able to continue this work online. Initially, this was born from an effort to connect people in real time all together into the same space to get people to know each other, to really set a foundation so that we can set the relationships so that we can build the world we want to see together. The thing that keeps coming to mind is a big needle and a big thread connecting all of the different members of the community, all of the different leaders together so that we have a shared sense of purpose, of mission, of values, and that we're aware of where each other stands so that we can work together towards this. And, in the last few years, attending various conferences, I wasn't seeing people, it was a lot of like coincidental meetings and sometimes some great dinners, but getting leaders of different psychedelic societies and content creators and lawyers and activists together in the same room wasn't happening that much. So this is where the leadership summits came from. And we were going to do this at the Liberty Summit in San Francisco. So now we have figured out how do we bring this to you guys online with Crowdcast. We initially had hoped like Zoom would allow us to do some of the networking, connecting. But what we're focusing instead is on building those relationships within conflict and holding space for it. And really, we're going to go over some tools. Troy and I have both had a lot of experience building community, and we're excited to share those with you guys.
Cool.
Also, really quick, sorry, one thing. I want to acknowledge just that the psychedelic community hasn't always been inclusive to women, LGBT, people of color, and though that's improving, we're all in these positions of we're wanting to include all perspectives and bring all voices and create a space for them. So if there's any suggestions, any people of color have, any LGBTQ have, please let us know. We're excited to include you.
Great. Thanks, Mareesa. When Mareesa invited me to do this, it was, kind of exciting because this is such a community that's important to me. Like, as Mike said, I was director of development of MAPS over 13 years ago. And to see how this community has grown, but being involved in so many different communities that have a mission over the years, I've just noticed some patterns of it. And also just in my own awareness of my own desire for a sense of belonging and a sense of purpose, a sense of group purpose, and how powerful that can be for all of us. And what are some of the things that get in the way of that? And I imagine for you, one of the things that makes sort of community organizing in the psychedelic community interesting is that it's like not even a question for people about why it's important, right? Because I don't know about you, but with psychedelics, like one of the reasons I love them so much is because of how much they teach us that we're all one. How, when you're in that peak experience, all of a sudden it's like, your in-group includes like every human, your in-group includes every rock, every tree, right? And it's like all together, look at the bounty of the universe. We're gonna bring about this amazing world, right? And then you come back and when you're full of excitement to build the world together and gather everybody up to be able to, make this great change and spread love around the world. And then somebody does something you don't like. And then something happens and you're stuck in a conflict and one person's triggered and then you're triggered. And the next thing you know, it's like, what happened? What happened to the city on the hill? What happened to the big idea? Wait, but I thought we were all one. And so we want to focus today on this very narrow aspect of community building. But it's not narrow. It's sort of the Achilles heel to community building, because if you can get along with people you disagree with, if we can nail conflict resolution, if we can nail seeing each other with best possible motives, right? Then we can really move toward the things that are that we all want. And so and there's lots of different riffs in this community and every other community. And that's the other thing. Like people who are very focused in one community and one goal often tend to be kind of assume that like it's unique to them. But having been in lots of different types of movements and communities, it's not unique. Okay. No matter how unique you think your particular conflict is, that it's how humans work. And it's something we can all work to overcome. There's a couple different types of rifts that we kind of see in the psychedelic community, and feel free to populate in the chat room other ones. But there's ideological differences. There's rifts that happen around inclusion versus exclusion of different groups or different plants or different types of psychedelics. There's personal rifts, right? People are working together. They're gonna have personal conflicts. There's tactical, right? I don't like that particular tactic for accomplishing that goal. Or there's strategic. I don't think we should move. Yes, I think we should have, this outcome, but I don't think we should push that thing first. I think we need to push this thing first. And then that person somehow is undoing the thing that you're trying to do. And so there's just a lot of opportunities for us to sacrifice the city on the hill vision of bringing us all together and moving this forward.
And I think this is a really good moment to highlight one of the most incredible psychedelic lessons that just comes up over and over again. How do we create change? It's what we put our attention on grows. And, it's really easy to go with the left-brained approach of wanting to solve problems by trying to figure it out, get to the nitty-gritty, get on the same page and figure out where does my perspective fit with your perspective, and let's find out where we differ, and let's really get each other to see each other's perspectives. But that's not possible, and that's really coming at the problem from one approach. And if we can just zoom out and shift and look at the problem, the concern in a different way. Ooh, we have an echo there. There we go. And so if we can shift that and alter it into really, instead of trying to fix the problem at the root and trying to just dig in our heels and figure it out, how about focusing our efforts on something else and what we want to see, put our attention, what we want to say, create the world you want to see. It's like a little plant the seed, water it, and just feed it, because when it is fueled by your life force energy, it's going to be amazing. But when you're putting your energy into figuring stuff out, it's just like that, you're just magnifying that energy.
Mm-hmm. You get stuck in the problem, and there's so much beauty outside of the problem. But Mareesa, I also want to make sure that we're like being clear that this isn't kumbaya, this isn't love and light, this isn't like, this isn't gag me with a crystal kind of spiritual bypass type things. As much as I believe in the whole, like, positivity and what you focus on grows and everything else, I also really recognize that you've got to be able to face the difficult things. And it's all fine and good until you're triggered or somebody else is triggered. And then everything, you hold dear is at stake because of somebody else's behavior. And so being able to focus on the shadow, I think, and really being able to see that and compost it and turn it into something good. But it's not good right when you first started looking at it. And so I think that's important too, that we don't just say, oh, well, it just was meant to be,
Agreed, 100%. I mean, it's like as kids we're taught, oh, honey, don't be sad, don't cry, but don't behave like that. We don't show our tempers like that, and we are shamed for having these so-called negative emotions. And so what we do is we press them down and we pretend we don't have them and we paste on a smiley face, right? And that is not by any stretch what we're encouraging here. So it's like kind of a fine line between what you put your attention on grows and also still honoring the heavy and harder emotions. And so a lot of what this framework is going to be is about us diving into those hard feelings and being present with them. An animal, when it has a fight with another animal, they have, and all the cortisol and like adrenaline is running and they're pumped and, that whole fight or flight thing is going on. Afterwards, they have a little seizure. They shake it out. They release it. They process their difficult emotions. And as humans, most of our systems don't teach us how to do that. So, and this is why there's so much conflict. So it's really a lot about bringing presence to that shadow self and sitting with it, being okay with it.
Mm-hmm. And let's make this like really tangible and not theoretical. If everybody can kind of just like imagine right now a conflict or a few conflicts, maybe even write them down, like with a person, not just an ideal, like even if it's a conceptual one, like I don't think we should be pushing this strategy or that strategy, or these people are ruining psychedelics, or these people are ruining psychedelics, right? Make it a person, like somebody that you shouldn't have to look far to find somebody that if you have to look far, you're in the wrong, then you need to be teaching it.
Think of your top 3 to start, and then look at those top 3 and figure out where's the most energy going towards. Where are you lit up the most with your anger, your fury, or your frustration, or your sadness, or whatever the emotion is. And we invite you for a moment to close your eyes and bring a lot of presence to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Imagine this person sitting across from you. Imagine how triggered you are, or angry you are, or, backed into a corner you are. And really just sort of sense into what that feels like for you. And then also imagine what it might be feeling like for them. And as we go through these various things, periodically just be pulling yourself into that space of an actual conflict.
Yeah, join us, because we're going to kind of come back to this little space you've cultivated at various points, and try to help walk you through these different things that have helped the two of us so much in our own similar conflicts, and are continuing to help us. We have to remind ourselves all the time. But okay, so again, just go ahead and closing your eyes. We're going to take a couple of deep breaths. A nice big inhale, allowing the breath to fill your belly, fill your lungs. Hold your breath for a moment and release. And I want you to call that person to mind. Take another nice deep breath. And release. Continue the slow, deep breathing. And think of this person. Think of the conflict. We know this isn't pleasant, and yet this is where you learn how to make headway in these conflicts. So you might find that it's hard to keep that slow, deep breath. And you might start to notice sensations in your body. And what I'd like to do is invite you to notice your attention and turn it into a flashlight and examine the inside of your body. And what does it feel like in your body? Start describing it to yourself. In terms of descriptive terms, is there a tightness in the rib cage? Is there a pulsing in your gut? Is there any colors? What does it feel like? Is your heart racing? And notice maybe how difficult it is to be present with this. And notice that you're doing okay, right? That this whole fight or flight thing that you're bringing to mind right now is all in your mind. And that you are actually in control of yourself, because you could go change the channel and watch something else. You could, close your computer and move on. And yet you choose to stay and continue to bring presence to this. So it's a muscle. We're exercising a muscle. And I just, what I really want to tune in on is that when we're in conflict, we're feeling triggered. And a lot of us have an aversion of, I'm being triggered, like, go away. I'm removing myself from the situation. I don't want to be triggered. I can't handle being triggered. And that's where the city on top of the hills disappears. That's where the dream disappears. That's where you stop making progress and you're not able to grow because you said, no more. This is really where we as humans have huge potential to shift this paradigm. Can we sit in that trigger and be okay with it? Mm-hmm. And can we notice that it might be a sign, it's a signpost of where we can grow?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's interesting. It's like, it's so easy for us to see it when other people are triggered and be like, wow, if only they could just see and, just relax and see that they're like, they're not in their space of highest wisdom because they're triggered. And it's very easy to see it in other people. And the real question is, can you see it in yourself? It's much, much harder, especially when you're seeing it in somebody else simultaneously. It's easy to take it off your attention off whatever your own trigger is, especially if it's different than the other person's trigger. Mm-hmm. And I want to take a moment to take your conflict and think about the cost of not resolving it, or the cost of not really loving that other person, finding a way to coexist well together. What is the cost? Let's start with you. Unhealthy conflict can really cause a deterioration of emotional, physical, and spiritual health. We're seeing more and more data around this. People who feel isolated, who feel like they don't belong, who are ostracized, have worse outcomes, heart disease, other things, stress responses, you name it. And then also just when we're in conflict, it takes our eyes off the prize. If you're an enemy of psychedelics and you're an enemy of this kind of movement that we're part of, there's nothing that you love more than watching you fight with whoever you're fighting with in the movement. That's the number one thing. Get people to fight and they won't move the ball down the field. If we can get them to fight over minutia within their own little world, then, they'll focus on that. Another thing is it makes life way less fun, right? I mean, I don't know. I think we're here to enjoy. I think we're here to really just enjoy our presence with each other and move the ball forward. And we can't do that when we're stuck in conflict. That becomes really hard. So there's some real cost to not resolving. And maybe in the comments to be able to share other costs of not resolving.
Go ahead.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah, keep going.
Keep going? Okay. Sure.
Yeah.
The goal here is to be at peace with difference while also being a stand for what you believe in. And that's the rub, right? It's like, how can you hold two things up at once? How can I be at peace with the fact that I have a different idea and a different way, and be a stand for what I believe in and be able to fight for that, but not fight with the other person about it? And the goal is to really like create as little drag on positive momentum for psychedelics as possible. Because every time there's one of these fights, it's just putting like things on the side of a race car, like just creating drag. And so to keep our eyes on the prize and not get lost in the internal battles.
One incredible tool that can really help you in this when it's actually happening. So, it might be online. I guess it's going to be online right now. When something happens, or with one of your housemates or wherever it is, instead of when something happens as a trigger and you're finding yourself getting heated and stressed out and falling into that fight or flight state, there's a trick called press pause. And it can become something that you do with your housemates or your loved ones, or, depending on who it is, how well you know them. If it's people intimately in your life, there's this thing, press pause. Like your paws are up and you can tell each other, hey, I'm doing this press pause thing just to let you know that I'm at a hard spot and maybe we can take a break right now and give ourselves some space, just a little bit, and it's kind of like without having to go into process about talking about it, because the whole talking thing usually just digs it deeper. So let's press pause and give yourself a moment. And so when it is with somebody that you don't know that well and you can't throw up your paws, you just internally notice the moment you're about to lash out. Notice the moment you're about to act in reaction instead of chosen response. Because that reaction is that unconscious reaction from, the program from childhood or some other trauma. But the response, that chosen response, is really where you can start to take control of your reaction and cultivate and create the circumstance and the outcome that you'd like to create.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is where the really hard work, I think, begins. And it's about empathy. We talk about empathy all the time, and it's so easy to be empathetic when you're not triggered. But the only time it really matters is when you are. And empathy is really out of fashion in this time of polarization. I mean, when you're on Facebook, I don't know, maybe you have different friends than me, but at least when I go on Facebook, I mean, the number of times I see people trying to create empathy with anybody that's not already part of their in-group is pretty rare. And so I saw a quote the other day, just a friend posted, it said, "Don't let the internet convince you to hate anyone." And I really think that's a real important moment in our world. And one of the things psychedelics teach us is like that next level orientation, even to people who totally disagree with us. And being able to the key with empathy is being able to truly understand someone's perspective in a way that they would feel understood if they heard you. Now, this is hard, right? It doesn't mean you agree with them or that their facts are accurate. And it can be really valuable to pause and be able to share back what you think their perspective is without any sarcasm, without anything, like even with all of the logical fallacies embedded in it and everything, like just try and, as if you were acting as them, like in a sincere, non-ironic play. How could you say it back in a way where they start nodding? Yes, that's exactly how I feel. That's exactly how I feel. Right. And oftentimes there's something paradoxical about this, that just being heard can often take care of a large portion of the battle. It's shocking how often that can really make a difference. Go ahead.
I was just going to say one tool that I find really helpful in that is like, really going, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is X, Y, Z. Mm-hmm. And then just making sure and checking in with them that you've got it right and that it matters to you to getting it right. It's a very helpful part of that.
Yeah. And being in the right frame of mind to be able to do that honestly and earnestly means that you've got to can be able to control your own nervous system to not let your trigger take over. And that's, where, meditation and psychedelics and other things really come in handy. Because if the first time you're trying to manage your nervous system is in the middle of something like this, you're unlikely to be successful. And then the other thing about
what do you do to actually like reflect back to someone in true sincerity? Like how do you find that space or
it's well, I'm not always good at it. I mean, like
work in progress.
Work in progress, right? I mean, this is as much a workshop for me as it is for anybody. I think it's by imagining best possible motive and also understanding trauma and understanding that when people are really triggered, it's like it changes how they make sense of things, and like a trusting that that there's, just being willing to like go over to the other side and not necessarily agree with it. Like say things that are totally antithesis, but give it a good college try.
I want to add that it's just like, sometimes it's not resolvable. Sometimes the other person doesn't want to figure it out and they might not want to play. And how do we how do we hold acceptance for that? And just know their trauma right now is so big that they're not in that space. And also in a triggered state, is there a way to create an invitation to create the container?
Yeah. How many people out there have been in the situation of like, you're showing up, you've taken all your conflict resolution classes and you're like, okay, I am going to be empathetic. And then it comes time for them to be empathetic and they won't do it. And they won't play by your mental construction of how you're supposed to do this dance of resolving. And then you stomp out of the room, right? There's nothing worse than the trigger of trying and then being, kicked for trying, right? And then that's the next phase of being able to understand, just recognizing that, just because you've, I put a quote on my Facebook the other day, just facing things is a prerequisite to resolving them. But just because you face things doesn't mean they're going to get resolved. And that's powerful. Do you want to say anything about that before we go into de-escalation?
Nope. I just, we do have some questions, so great. We'll take them in 10 minutes. So, but let's dive into de-escalation.
Yeah. So we talked about this a little bit before, but the name of the game here is reducing defensiveness in yourself and in them, and avoiding the temptation for self-righteousness, scoring points, or revenge, right? These, especially right now, these are hard because our whole media and Facebook is it's just so all about this, right? It's everybody being like, look at how right I am, and so it's so satisfying. It feels like you're mad, but it's also really satisfying, right? And it's to avoid that temptation and being able to notice when that is coming up. And then reminding each other of the ultimate goal that you share. It's so easy to get narrowly focused, but when you can keep bringing it back to the ultimate goal, can be so valuable. One of the other things is making sure that you are not just protecting yourself, but that you're also protecting your counterpart or your opponent, and that you're caring for them. And it's an Aikido principle, right? Where in Aikido, and I've never practiced Aikido, but this is from what I understand, is that you're not just there to protect yourself. Your goal is also to protect your opponent from being hurt. And another quote I read recently that didn't have anybody's name associated with it, but it really stood out to me. It's that emotional intelligence is measured by how well you take care of others when you are upset with them, and how you take care of yourself when people are upset with you. So some of us are the type of, we're constantly want to take care of the other person, but in the process, we're so mortified that we've been misunderstood that we can't find our own center and our own confidence or our own boundaries in it. And so those two things I think are super important. And then lastly, on de-escalation, have fun with each other, if that's possible. Get out of the conflict. Wind up at a concert, dancing, right? Do something fun that can sometimes shocking. It's shocking how sometimes something fun or something from outside falling. All of a sudden you're like fighting with somebody and there's like an earthquake or something, right? And the next thing you know, it's like obvious that you're on the same team. Or not that an earthquake is fun. That's a terrible example. But
little ones, little tiny earthquakes.
The little ones are fun.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so those are some thoughts on de-escalation.
Yeah, I agree. And so much of what's coming up for me right now is how to create more fun and joy in my life. And then from that well-resourced place to then shift into difficult places. So it's like really when it comes down to how well you're taking care of yourself, can you alternate where you're putting your attention in your day and really like choose, okay, I'm going to go into this challenging space and I'm going to do it right after I did something fun, or I'm going to follow it with something fun. I'm going to take care of myself afterwards, so that it is really that you're not like, oh my God, I'm so tired. And this is, our system has taught us, has really valued work super hard, prove yourself. And I'm sure a lot of people are struggling the same thing with me. I just have worked myself into the ground, and then I'll come to conflicts and just be like, I'm too tired, and I'm exhausted. And why do we have to do this? And so, and it really just brings me up to this point of, and revisiting the point of creating a container. And so visiting in the case of people that you're living with right now, or people that you love or whatever, they just say, okay, let's come up with some tools. And there's so many amazing tools. We're going to reference some books and some other solutions as well, but really invite the people that you find yourself coming into conflict into, like the invitation that has been really a life for me is, I really value our relationship. And I know we're triggering each other so that I have an opportunity to grow. Mm-hmm. And that growth right now is valuable, even though it's hard and I'm not loving every moment of it. It's valuable. And I cherish our relationship so much that I want to really give us a chance to unpack whatever's coming up and hold space for each other to figure it out. And it's like, there's an intentionality around that's saying, even when it's hard, I'm here with you because I care enough. And that's, not necessarily only valuing the relationship, which is so beautiful, but also valuing what you guys are working for. So if it's, when it's in psychedelics, it's like, I value our shared purpose so much that I'm willing to put the time aside to come to some resolution. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And one of the things in that realm that I've found valuable is starting off with your goal. And sometimes the goal is, I'd like to be closer to you, but there's something in the way. Is a really good, can often be a great starting point sometimes with folks. And I think when we get into to really looking for the win-win, I want for a moment just to think back on your life and all the various conflicts you've been in over the years, and all the various problems that when you were facing them, it seemed like you understood the playing field and there could only be this way or that way. How many of those things were kind of miraculously solved in ways that at the time you couldn't have imagined them resolving that way? Sometimes they don't resolve. Sometimes they just sort of fade and become less important. And then something else shifts and it sort of unravels on its own. Sometimes it's like this other thing that you didn't understand about something you both needed or wanted, or a third party or something else shows up that changes everything. And to rather than wait till the end and till it's 5 years from now and you're looking back on that conflict and realizing, oh, well, yeah, I guess I learned something from that or whatever. Why not do that now? Why not cultivate a sense of wonder and about how this particular conflict you're in right now will resolve, and imagine what you're going to learn from it now. Don't wait.
I really want to bring right now into this the idea of, trauma and difficulties are really more like, that we go, oh, that trauma, that's so sad and that's so hard, and that's all very true. But individually, if we can redefine what it means for us, and I'm throwing conflict in here as well, then we can see it as an opportunity to grow and expand. Without some obstacle in our path, we would just flatline, right? We would just know there. But with an obstacle in our path, we're forced to grow and expand and become greater than where we were to begin with. Mm-hmm. And so when you're running into this and holding that in mind and going, okay, this is an opportunity to get better. This is like a puzzle my soul gave me or whatever to help me expand. So holding that frame is very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, someone, I was just reading over some of the questions and somebody asked about, what happens when, someone's being abusive or those kinds of things. And it reminds me of a Ram Dass quote where somebody asked him, how do you love somebody who's trying to hurt you? And he said, from afar. And so none of this is to put people in harm's way, right? And of course, there's always all kinds of paths, and then we're not focused on that in this. We're focused on the kind of the usual run of the mill kind of stuff. And I think there are just totally different strategies when you get into to that level of things.
I say seek help.
Mm-hmm.
There's resources for that.
Yeah, and maybe we should shift into some of the getting help stuff and go into that a little bit. Do you want to hit some of those?
Yeah.
You guys want Q&A?
Well, let's just run through these real quick. So one is daily meditation. You can't notice what you're doing unless you can notice what you're doing. Another is do MDMA together. Can be really, really powerful depending on where it is. Getting in a professional mediator or a couples counselor or somebody that you both trust or that has a stake in a positive outcome. Books like Nonviolent Communication, learning about the drama triangle. Chris Voss has this great book called Never Split the Difference, which is about negotiation in a way that can create win-wins. Crucial Conversations is another one. And then there's the sort of spiritual piece of this that sort of underlies a lot of it. So books like Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach, Loving What Is by Byron Katie, Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, all good books that I think get at a lot of the spiritual basis for connection and resolution in the name of community, in the name of belonging. So, yeah. Do some questions.
Yeah, I'll pop back on here actually for some questions I have here. Hello. So I think you already answered the first one. It's from Juliana but it was about abusive dynamics. And if you tried to approach somebody have done abusive things in a collaborative and loving way, they still refuse to address or take responsibility. And you mentioned from a distance, but is there like an actual like next step you would do in a situation?
I think, we talk about mediation?
Mediation it's just so specific. We're just, we're not going to be able to, that's so specific, and it's hard to say what you mean by abusive. Like, that's,
personally, this is a whole other field, and like not qualified to give abuse counseling.
Right. So
suggestion.
Do you have specific mechanisms, agreements, or contracts or onboarding processes, not specific for a conflict, but for organizations and businesses to implement as far as values and communication methods to put into the structure of an organization?
I think that it's always good to have in any group a format for sharing difficulties. One of the things I've always done, I can't say I've always done it, actually. I've tried to always do it, and I've probably failed at it. But is to have regular check-ins. One of the things in management that you have is you don't just have a check-in with somebody when there's a problem. You have regularly scheduled check-ins so that you're catching stuff before there's an issue. Well, we can do that with any of our involved relationships. Like, I've never understood why the heads of the different organizations, like when I was in the cannabis movement, I didn't understand why. If you have a challenge with that person that leads that other nonprofit, how come you guys don't have like a meeting every month, to just catch stuff as it happens? Instead, it's just always a shit show every time, right? There's just some certain basic common sense kinds of things if we really value our relationships. And there's plenty of things like Crucial Conversations and other books and other protocols that are out there. But I wouldn't call myself an expert on developing those.
I just want to chime in. There's I think what's created a really great set of tools for me is the Human Awareness Institute. Mm-hmm. And they do weekend workshops where they've really helped pick apart human dynamics. It is a little edgy. It's clothing optional workshops, but they're really about creating boundaries, creating containers to explore conflict within self, and to really create clear vision. And so a lot of those are the tools that I found myself using and referencing indirectly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. We have a question from Melissa. On a larger front, looking at the bigger picture, how do you see us able to move forward with the plant medicine world, keeping all of this in mind, pulling all of us together, especially including Indigenous people?
I think it's a compound, a combined approach. What Troy said about really creating spaces for people to have voices, not because they're going, hey, can you listen to me? We want to be heard, but rather creating a space for going, all the voices that haven't been heard, what do you have to say? We want to hear where you are. Can you weigh in on these things that we're developing is one big part of it. So I think, creating spaces for people to talk. And I, again, really encourage creating relationship and finding the joy in that, and building the community. And then from that place, then creating spaces for different issues and topics to be addressed. For example, one of the workshops we would do if this was an in-person meeting is after we've spent 2 hours getting everyone to know each other on fun, seemingly casual things, or what is your passion and desire in this life? What do you want to accomplish? Questions like that get people to know each other. After that's been set, then we have 5 big posters written with topics that are very important and alive right now for the community. For example, including Indigenous voices and decriminalization and peyote and whatever. And so we have all these topics on different pieces of paper, and then you break up the room into groups of 5, and each group gets to visit each piece of paper and write down their 2 cents on what that topic is. So then at the end, the last group will then come up in front of the entire group and say, here's a summary of all the different perspectives this room shares. And here's the common thread that we see. So we're really encouraging people to co-collaborate, not in a like, we need to figure it out, but rather let us build and share and collect and grow together from that, again, that alive place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I would add to that is that, like, I think there's a simple approach here, which is that a simple but hard approach, which is that as humans, we're just forgetful. We forget particularly these kinds of things about empathy and about like understanding others' perspectives and the importance of the big picture and all of that stuff. Like, we're forgetful. Like, we forget every minute. I mean, I used to have an app on my phone that told me multiple times a day that you're going to die. And then has a quote about impermanence, because literally, like, after you look at it, literally 4 minutes later, you will be operating as if you are permanent, right? And this is true for all of this. It's like, how do we build in the process to continually remind ourselves of these things? And that's what brings about our that intuition around how to bring other people in and how to connect with different voices and how to move forward together. I think one of the things the psychedelic movement really has going for it, if we can realize it, is that we have these tools that are credible tools of introspection. And sometimes when we show up at work on Monday, it's like as if that happened in some other container, and we forget to bring it over. And so I just think presencing that in some way can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, that's
and then you'll find the answers.
So there are closing remarks starting in 3 minutes, but we could ask, I think, one more question if we answer it very quickly, briefly, but it's an important question that I want to bring. How can white folks go about mediating challenging conversations around marginalizations in the non-white elite experience of other white folks who are defensive and not open to accepting accountability and searching for real solutions?
I think it's by living by example. If any of you guys were in the North Star talk earlier, it's really positive peer pressure. And I think that has its own power. And I think also just articulating every time we have a moment and we're speaking, to create, again, this space for that, to acknowledge that this is a really important thing we do, is what comes to mind right off the bat. And the funny thing is, Troy and I were talking about this, and I was like, I would love to know more tools. So if anyone else has ideas, I think this is something very important for everybody, all the white folks, all the privileged folks, to have in their toolbox. Because,
yeah, one of the things that we would have done if we were in person is an exercise that I love to lead that really helps create a real felt sense, not just a conceptual sense like we've done today, but a real felt sense of empathy across lines of difference, and gets kind of below the head and into the heart and into the body of really getting it. And I think from that place, I think then people are much more able to hear things. I mean, forwarding, shaming posts on Facebook doesn't do it. Just FYI.
I want to second that. The shame is the worst way to get anybody to change their behavior.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. I believe this is, it's time to go to track 1. Chacruna just posted there. Right. There are some closing remarks from the Chacruna team. So Troy, Mareesa, thank you both for this.
Hey, thank you, Mike.
I will see you both soon, I'm sure. And thank you everyone for tuning in. See you over in track 1.
Yay. Bye everyone. Thanks for coming. Bye.